Mo Rocca. I am so excited. I'm a fangirl, a fan lady, a fan elder of yours, and I'm so grateful that you are joining me today on your Second Prime podcast. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Gretchen. I would call you a prime fan.
Prime fan, yes. Thank you, thank you. So you're calling me in from New York. Are you in New York right
That's
now?
right, yes.
Okay, we're bicoastal. I'm in Southern California in Newport, and so thrilled to have you. So, how we normally do it on Your Second Prime is we do a mini bio. I know a lot about you because I've been a fan of yours for a really long time. But if you could tell our listeners who may not have the privilege of understanding the Mo Rocca effect and how you've bend culture, please share.
Well, I'll tell you this. I think of my career as a process of becoming more and more aware, attuned, committed to what I find interesting, and then doing my best to make other people interested in it. So I think it's a process in my 20s and 30s, figuring out both where I fit in, where I could excel, but frankly, what I wanted to do. That's not when people would say to me, "So what do you want to do?" I would oftentimes be a little panicked by the question because I thought, oh, is there something wrong with me that I can't say? Well, this is exactly what I want. And somebody would say to me, oftentimes people would say, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I would say, well, I don't have a 5-year plan. And frankly, we know from the history of the Soviet Union that 5-year plans were disastrous. So anyway, but over the course, but I began, to put it in concrete terms, I began by doing stage work, musicals, and I'm a big fan of musicals, and I loved it. I was in the Southeast Asian tour of the musical Grease. I did regional theater. I eventually made my way to Broadway. But a very pivotal moment for me creatively was when I was hired to write and produce for a PBS kids show called Wishbone, which was really, really interesting. A good friend of mine had developed the show and she hired me for it, so I was fortunate. And it was about a dog who teaches kids about classic literature through these elaborate fantasy sequences. So in one episode, he was Sancho Panza in Don Quixote. In another episode, he was Odysseus in the Odyssey. And it was really where I learned how to write and tell a story. I had a solid formal education, but this job really, I had to take classic novels and reinterpret them for 6 to 11-year-olds. And it was like a writing assignment from an English professor on acid, but it could not have been a better boot camp for storytelling. And then eventually I made my way into The Daily Show with Jon Stewart the first time he hosted it. And that got me into the world of comedy. And there was a lot of writing there. And then for the last 17 years or 18, I've been on CBS Sunday Morning, which is sort of the perfect job for me. It's like going back to college and taking only electives. So one week I might be telling audiences about the history of the pencil, or this next assignment I have, I'm not sure when we're being released, but some viewers may have already seen my interview with Kieran Culkin, terrific actor. Or I love strange history stories. I like doing pieces on theater. So, and in between I've written books that sort of align with my work on CBS Sunday Morning. They're eclectic. One was a collection of mobituaries, my version of obituaries of people that didn't get the send-off I feel they deserved, some of whom you've heard of, others whom you haven't. And then this recent book with my co-author Jonathan Greenberg is Roctogenarians.
Yes, I have it.
Right?
I have it right here.
So that's how I would sort of give my bio, I guess.
Oh, thank you so much. So I appreciate your perspective because it seems like you again had a formal education that was really good, and then you sort of went with the energetic breadcrumbs. You went along and learned
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole way. And I think you do have the dream job at CBS Sunday Morning. I really, and thank you for doing it so well and being an interesting and
yeah.
compelling and a clever writer. You're very clever. You're clever without going, jumping the shark with too much
You're right.
humor, which then feels
Well, thank you.
campy. So well done for
Thank you.
setting a beautiful tone.
Thank you.
So let's talk about what you've actually learned most recently about yourself that your future self will thank you for. Your Roctogenarian self will thank you for.
Well, I think in writing about people who accomplished great things in roughly the last third of their lives, I mean, first of all, one of the reasons I wanted to do this, as in all projects I do, is so that I can learn. I'm basically looking for guidance. Years ago, I did a cooking show where I went around the country learning to cook from grandmothers and grandfathers in their kitchen. And I did it for totally selfish reasons because I didn't know how to cook. I still don't. But really because I wanted to hear from people in their later years what mattered to them. And what I learned on that project, and it was, I think, corroborated. That's your phone. I love that. I love that. What a great thing to be interrupted by.
I
The
mean, it
CBS
is
Sunday Morning ringtone.
the CBS Sunday Morning ringtone, and I bought it about 10 years ago. And then my biggest challenge is every time I get a new phone, making sure that it transfers over and it, you know.
Yeah,
But it is sort of my love letter every day.
I love it. Yeah,
Several times a day, I
yeah.
get a little CBS Sunday Morning. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get too much. I think I learned on that project, and it was corroborated by this, that in general, the older you get, the less you care about what other people think of you. And I think that that's really liberating. And so it's not a surprise to me that there are so many people who accomplished greatness and really began new lives in many instances in their 60s, 70s, and 80s and beyond, because they're unfettered and they're more present-minded. One of the big surprises of this book, learning these stories and writing about them, is I expected that the later people get in life, the more they fret about the future because there's less time on the other side, obviously. But that's not the case. They're actually more present-minded. They're less afraid of the future in general. And that, again, is liberating and allows you to act, to do.
Yeah. So do you feel that that has altered you? It has informed your view. Like, seeing it is not the same as folding it in and making it yours as well. Are you less worried about the future? And I don't mean existential future. I mean the future of what Mo Rocca will do, what you will do, and how you'll decide, wow, also, is there more pressure that in your later third that you're like not quitting and that you're doing great things?
Well, I don't want to bury the lead, but I'm 55 and 11 and a half weeks ago, I became a father for the first time. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, my husband and I became fathers to a beautiful baby girl, Josie. And so I would say that's my late-ish in life triumph. And it certainly is, as any, all the cliches that I've heard all through the years are all, I'm now understanding them. But that itself, I think, is an act of faith and in the future. So, but I think it did, the decision to make that happen and following through on it is something I was able to do now more so than 20 years ago. I think I would have been more fretful in my 30s, even though I'm fully aware that doing it in my 50s means that at her high school graduation, I might have to use the ramp. I hope I don't. I hope
No,
I don't.
you're going to take good care of yourself. And
Yes.
based on your book, I think you said keep stretching forward while you're reading the book. Like you should be bending forward and
Yeah.
staying limber. So I would agree with you. Stay limber. Firstly, congratulations on
Thank you so
Josie. I
much.
think that
Thank
is
you.
an act of courage. And as a person who did 13 IVFs and became a first and only time mother at the age of 46 and my husband at the age of 50, we
Wow.
have a 10-year-old. And
Wow.
so you're not alone. We're all having kids
Oh
in
my
our
gosh. I'm so
second
happy
prime.
for you.
I'm so happy for you.
Thank
It's
you.
really cool, and cool people should have babies, and good and warm-hearted people should have babies and raise them right. I mean, that's
Wow.
just like
Oh,
our
I'm so happy.
contribution. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that with me.
Yeah, you're not alone. So my husband was 50 when Hudson was born. He just turned 10. My husband just turned 60. Are you ready for this? I turned 56 on election day.
Wow.
So,
Yikes. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yikes,
yeah.
okay, exactly. So, the Xanax is ready, and I'm like, just gonna be like, ah. Anyway, I'm thrilled for you and Josie, and
Thank you.
I love that you've learned to be courageous and
Yeah.
hopeful. So what I've learned is that we get burned out. So as a late in life parent, my direction to you is to really guard your energy. Because the wisdom that we have now that we're older is fantastic, but there is a legitimate difference in how we process time and energy as we
Hmm.
get older. So that's what I would say, that I have been finishing up my book and doing my podcast. And then I have this really active corporate career where I support health equity and have the opportunity to work with The Economist and to work with the Nobel Women's Initiative. And so I have this really robust, main stage life. And then this right here, this desire to disrupt aging and have interesting conversations with people that are changing the landscape of aging by your beautiful book and really just how you show up in the world and highlighting people that do interesting things, is that we get tired and we need to be with people that we love, and we need to make time for that because it's easy to grind yourself and that we need to connect.
But it's very interesting when you said be with people that give you energy or make you happy or certainly don't drain you.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
energy vampires allowed.
Energy vampires. And can I ask you also, without sidetracking us, because you'll know a lot more about this than I certainly, um, anti-inflammatory foods and diets. Is
Yes,
that's a real thing and really important, right? I'm
it's
hearing a lot
critical.
about that. I'm hearing a
Yeah,
lot about that.
it's critical. And so an important thing for your youngster is to set her gut health up right now.
Hmm.
So making sure because you likely, I don't know if did
Formula.
she formula? Okay, do your best to not be on formula. Like get
Okay.
her off that as soon as you can because it is really it's very sugar based. And
Okay.
so if, there are milk banks, so you could
Yep.
do milk and whatnot, but fortify her gut. Go and find, sort of like infant probiotics so
Okay.
that you can, because her entire immune system, her inflammatory processing center is her gut. So the brain and the gut develop exactly at the same time, right? So when we say trust your gut, we're saying that's your second brain. So you
Right.
really want to support that crosstalk between the brain and the gut. And that's how, the book that I'm writing about
Yeah.
aging, really, it all ties back to our biological need to be centered and in homeostasis and doing something we love and to be in purpose.
Hmm.
And to find purpose is actually supportive of gut health. To support your purpose, you have to support your gut health. Anxiety, ADHD, did I hear her?
No, I don't think so. Wait. Yes, you did. You
Mama's ears.
you
Yeah,
did. Oh my God, you are amazing. Your mama's ear.
I heard Josie. Oh my gosh, I hear her. She's probably wanting a little something. But
Yeah.
keep her off of grains. Go for, like fatty foods like avocado was Hudson's first food, things like that are really supportive of gut health. But so just tend it like a garden
Right.
because there are, you know, basically there is a world war within your gut among protozoa, uh, uh, bacteria, and viruses and fungi that are all in there searching for dominance within your gut. So it's sort of like you always have to weed your garden, make sure, and sugar is one of those things that does not support good gut health.
Okay, this is great. Thank you, Gretchen. Thank
You
you.
bet. You bet. We could, I'm happy to chat with you
Yeah,
anytime about
great.
it.
Thank you.
Um, but back to how we feel about aging. What was your favorite story? I know so far my favorite story in your book. What's your favorite story?
I think that the writers collectively were my favorite. Frank McCourt and Laura Ingalls Wilder were favorites of mine, and that sort of connected to my mother, who I write a closing essay about. The notion of people wondering if their story is worth telling, I find really emotionally compelling. I find it heartbreaking to think that there are so many people that live out their last days never believing that their story was worth telling. I find it almost hard to talk about. I'm not saying that everybody needs to have their story published by a major publishing house, but I think that you have to believe, or I hope that everyone believes that their story is worth telling. I mean, to think that Frank McCourt, who wrote Angela's Ashes, which sold 4 million copies for good reason worldwide, struggled all his life with whether or not his story was worth telling. I find that sort of remarkable. He finally decided that he would, quote, die howling if he didn't tell his story, and I believed that. And when he finally did tell his story, he later said, "It took me 2 years and all of my life to tell this story." So Frank McCourt, Laura Ingalls Wilder, I love those stories. I love the fictional story of Ebenezer Scrooge. I think it has a hold on us. A Christmas Carol, because for two reasons. I think because the lesson that it's never too late to become a better person, but I think on an even deeper level, the idea that everyone wants to be remembered by somebody. I think that's part of why that story is compelling. But I've also, as the days go by, think more and more about Yasmin Laurie, who's in the section of the book about ageless architects. It's sort of a phenomenon with architects who hit their prime very late in life, sometimes in their 90s. But Yasmin Laurie is Pakistan's first woman architect. She was what's known as a star architect, doing glitzy, fancy commissions. But for a long time, she had said that she wanted to give back and help Pakistan's poor. And finally, after the devastating Kashmir earthquake of 2005, where 80,000 people died and hundreds of thousands were left homeless, she completely changed her life, and is responsible for giving tens of thousands of people safe, sustainable homes to live. And she also changed the way that she worked. She used to be very unforgiving. And now she, by her own account, is much kinder to the people with whom she works. But part of what I find interesting about the story is I've known so many people in my life, a lot of them are lawyers, who say, "Oh, I'm just going to wait until I'm either financially set or personally set or have accomplished X, Y, and Z before I do that thing I really want to do." And I don't know what it is that keeps them from doing it. And you may know. It's fear of some kind. I don't think it's selfishness, it's fear. But she did that thing. She was a big deal and could have continued being a big, very rich deal in the world of glitzy, glassy, shiny architecture. But she did that thing. She did turn her life around completely and give back.
Yeah, that is so cool. So I think it's that connection. So I, of course, don't have it figured out, but I would postulate that it is finding purpose, right? And so, although your lawyer friends, and I think we all do this, especially from 0 to 40, sort of in ego and acquisition. You're like, oh, I need this, I need to be that, I want me. We're just very ego driven, and although we're fully grown in our physical selves, we continue to grow, and these are the stories you're telling, is this continued emotional growth.
Yeah.
And we just haven't, as a society, made room for that. We haven't said, oh, yes, you continue to grow. So your second prime is, in fact, that permission structure. Hey, wait a second. What if we all thought that at 60, we went back to school, or we did that thing, and that was your permission structure? And it's okay that in the beginning of your life, you don't really have that space, because you're learning. It's dress rehearsal. It's you're blocking. You're figuring out where to go stand on the stage. To use theater terms. I don't even know if
Yeah.
that's a theater term, but I'm trying. Um, so the idea, I call it in my book, the inconvenient dream. The inconvenient dream that is tied to what you stand for, right? So when you really know what you stand for, that doesn't come until later in life. And that can change, in fact. One may stand for making a lot of money when they're young, or being famous, or deciding they want to have a family. There's no wrong answer. But that inconvenient dream, there are three components of it for me, that I lay out in the book. Number one, it is tied to what you stand for, what you hold dear, and what you would die for ultimately. What you're like, you know what, this is what I believe in. Number two, it's something that you have pushed off because it's inconvenient. It's not easy. It costs money. You don't know how to do it. You don't have the skills. You don't have the time. You're embarrassed for whatever reason. The inconvenient dream is not easy. It's not a goal. It's not something that you could easily accomplish, right? Or it's too audacious. It's like so big that you just are embarrassed. You're like, someone else to do that. I'm not worthy. It could be that you don't feel worthy. And then, Mo, that third thing is it gives back. It isn't about you. It's about others. The inconvenient dream is a dream of service, because that is how we're built. We have forgotten that we are built for each other. We are built to work in connection, that we in fact are there are no solutions without problems. We are built to solve together. And I happen to be a Stoic, and I follow Stoicism. And I think, without the problem, we don't have something to do. So the obstacle is the way in many ways. So
The obstacle's the way. That's
the
great.
obstacle's the way. So the inconvenient dream is there for us if we want it. If we want to do it. So let's take your architect. She has stood for something in her life for a very, very long time. But she needed a catalyst to say, this speaks to me. This is the thing. So the inconvenient dream is audacious and big and scary, and feels hard. It is who you are, what you stand for, and it gives back. And that right there is the most anti-aging tonic in the world. It is the most cognitively protective, the most emotionally protective, the most resilient building activity you could have in your life. It is the thing that will protect you from Alzheimer's, from cardiovascular disease, improve your sleep. So it's tied to our biology, because we need to be of service. That's my theory.
Gee whiz, boy. Well, first of all, I wish we'd talked to you before we wrote our book, but but there is so much there in what you're saying. But the first thing that occurs to me is how unforgiving we are with ourselves when we don't, in our 20s and 30s, have it figured out. We don't know what that is, or we're not, or if it's buried beneath. And how so many end up feeling like failures, or that they're just fated to keep doing what they're doing. as time goes on because they didn't have it figured out at 18 or 19. So yeah, I mean that's I opened the book in the Roctogenarians in the preface with the story about the rapper Chance the Rapper, big sensation. Certainly when I was part of a panel interviewing him in 2015, and I was 46 at the time. This was for a comedy show for Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me on National Public Radio. And I thought, I'll get an easy laugh here by saying the following, because I was 46 at the time. I said, I'm 46, it's too late for me to become a rapper. And it got the middling laugh it deserved, kind of a hokey line like that. But he looked at me dead serious and he said, I don't know. Some people might say it's too soon. And that got a laugh, and the conversation moved on. It was in front of a huge crowd being taped for a huge audience in Millennium Park in Chicago. But I was really thunderstruck by his response, because beneath any kind of joke is truth. And his wasn't even really a joke. He meant it. And what really shook me was a little bit of embarrassment, because I realized with that interaction that I had internalized the idea that 46 was too old. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to become a rapper. That's not the point here. But I think what he was saying, I know what he was saying is, to be any kind of artist, you have to have something to say. And maybe you're not there yet. So I found it both embarrassing, but also revelatory and reassuring in a sense. And it really made me hit reset, that I thought, I can't believe that I've fallen into this trap of thinking of myself as over the hill at 46. This is insanity.
Well, it's not your fault. You've been
Right.
marketed into it. You've been,
Right.
I mean, this is an entire trillions of dollars have gone into making us all feel that way,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, I in the book write that we give, maybe we don't do it so much anymore, but when I was young, I was given a deck card of old maids. Hi, young little girl full of promise. Here's your future, predicated on finding a man. And if you don't, you're an old maid. And then an old maid is this horrendous looking, lady who's all strung out and a mess. And at a young age, we're just giving instructions, and then we don't realize it, and we pick it up and we internalize it, and it becomes part of what we think is real. So you and I are so aligned with creating, and my goal is to disrupt aging, how we see it and how people do it. Does aging suck? Maybe a little. Do we suck at aging? Absolutely.
Right.
We need to look at this in a completely different way. And it's not the answers, it's the quality of the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Chance said to you, well, maybe you're actually not there yet.
Right.
Which was so profound for you, that this young rapper with these girls screaming everywhere was able to be very Yoda-like and say, maybe
Yeah.
more wisdom for you, it will be in your future, stuff
Yeah.
like that. And that was my Yoda. I'm not very good at it. But anyway, so what do you think your overarching message would be for people that are in the trap, that think, yeah, but you're Mo Rocca, you have a high level of success, notoriety, you're you're living life like a big deal. You're a big deal. So what about people who don't feel like they have the ability to make change because their lives are more constrained?
Well, that's a great question, and one that I think probably has a lot of practical dimensions, right? If somebody is, working 2 or 3 jobs to support a family, that's a tough one. I've considered sort of people that have more what I would say are psychological rather than material barriers. And I've sort of thought of myself as a lobbyist, almost trying to kind of cajole people into going for it. I know one of the things I've told myself is, and it's hard not to lapse into cliche, is, just do it, or what's the worst that can happen, right? Failure in the age of social media, hashtag fail is such an insidious kind of cudgel to use against people. But, I host a show also about innovation and invention, and all the great innovators kept failing until they succeeded. It really is truly a necessary part. But it's a little bit of a negative way of maybe trying to lobby somebody, but I know I've tried it with friends, which is you don't have to worry about embarrassment because most other people are so focused on themselves, they're not going to notice. So these are all sort of stratagems I've thought of when I try to convince people in my own life to go for it, which is don't worry. If you fail, if you fall flat on your face, people are too involved in their own lives to sit around going, look at what happened to her or look at what happened to him. But I think more to the point is, you don't want to die howling. You don't want to be like Frank McCourt almost was. So I mean, so that's sort of a kind of a collection of answers there. I don't know what I would tell people who have real material constraints. I suppose I try to tell them, or I'd advise them, depending on what those constraints are, to just take it piece by piece, just a little bit by a little bit.
Well, how do you eat an elephant? Just one little bite at a time, right?
Right.
Because I try to answer this question for myself, being entirely dedicated to inclusion and being a voice for everyone. So that requires understanding that everyone doesn't start at the same place. Everyone's, psyche, material opportunities, point of view is all so different. But one thing I believe everyone can agree upon is that a purpose-filled life, even if it has struggles, is so rewarding that if we can find what we stand for, you're protected in a way. I feel like it really is like an inoculation against, the S show that is sometimes life, right? So,
I think that is such a great point. One of the things I thought of when we were putting this book together is if you want to retire and you just want to retire and enjoy life, by all means do it. I'm not saying you must have a new career if you're healthy, or even if you're not healthy at 65. You must, embark on that. But I also think you're right. I just know anecdotally from some of the older people in my own life who are in good health, that those who haven't embraced their purpose, who are too shy or afraid or something, it does seem are oftentimes whiling away the hours instead of really treasuring all the extra time they have.
yeah, I hear little Josie again. My mama ears are just like, I can't believe it.
But my husband is with her, so she's certainly
Good.
not. Yeah.
Maybe she can make an appearance. I don't know if you have like a little bell, but um, the thing that I love about the way you deliver, firstly, you're a beautiful storyteller, and I could listen to you for days. The way you deliver with such generosity about people's experiences. So my favorite person in your book is Mary Church Terrell.
Yeah.
She's a badass. I was like, oh, I love this gal. She really was tenacious. And so I was really touched by her story. I think
That
the most
story,
so far.
that was, when we started this, I said I definitely want an older civil rights leader, because most of us are or should be familiar with the stories of, John Lewis leading the march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge at 25, or the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivering the I Have a Dream speech at 34. But I knew vaguely that there were senior leaders. And even before we found, as it were, Mary Church Terrell, and our researcher Zoe sort of brought her to our attention, what I found compelling was the idea of somebody fighting for a better world that at best they'll end up living in for a very short time, even if they succeed. And I found that idea so poignant, so compelling. And that's who Mary Church Terrell was.
Yeah.
I mean, she had spent her life as a young woman, born only months after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. She had been an early warrior in the fight against the savage practice of lynching. And as a woman in what we call her middle age, she was a co-founder of the NAACP. But it was when she was much older, much more advanced in life, that she was denied entrance to a chapter of the American Association of University of Women, even though she was one of the first Black women to have an advanced degree, hers from Oberlin. But it was simply, her rejection was simply about her racial background, that she was fired up and rejoined the fight. And she led sit-ins in the 1950s to integrate the lunch counters of Washington, D.C. I mean, it's always worth remembering how shocking, how insane, how deeply wrong that in the citadel of liberty in Washington, D.C., you had segregated public accommodations as late as the 1950s. But she went to Thompson's restaurant 4 times, getting kicked out each time. This was a very formidable woman, being kicked out, denied service. And eventually the suit brought around that made its way to the Supreme Court. The court ruled the right way. And she was about 90, and she died a few months later. So she lived to see justice prevail, but again, got to enjoy it for only a very brief time on earth. So, I mean, not enough attention has been paid to the older people who were part of the great civil rights struggle.
Yeah, it's just such a beautiful story, and that we are not, we don't need to sideline ourselves. We need to have sort of like age neutrality. It doesn't need to be young or old, but just the light that is within the vessel that you are walking around in needs to shine brightly. That is our job. So I hope that people read your book. I am so grateful to my sister-in-law, Donna, for sending it to me.
Thanks, Donna.
And thanks, Donna. And Mo Rocca, can I have you back?
I would love to come back, Gretchen. This has been I've really loved our time together.
Us too. And, me too. I mean, there's my team that's here, so us too. So, and then I want to meet Josie, and I'm happy to give you any nutritional advice for babies.
Thank you. That's great.
You are going to have a blast with her. She's amazing. And I just, before I wrap up, with my deepest gratitude, I'd love for other people to know about where to find you, what's your next thing for 2025, really quickly, if you want to share with us.
Sure thing. I can be found many Sundays, not every Sunday, on CBS Sunday Morning, where I'm a regular. I appear occasionally on Wait, Don't Tell Me. My podcast, Mobituaries, 4 seasons of it are available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm very proud of that. That was a real labor of love. And I would say that's generally what I'm doing. I don't know what my next book will be, but I'm looking forward to making people interested in things they didn't expect to be interested in for many years to come.
Well, you're doing an absolutely beautiful job, and I thank you, and hopefully we'll get to meet each other in person one day.
I'd like that.
And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you, Gretchen.